Hello and welcome to this video where the subject is the straightening of horizons and to some degree verticals too. My name's Barry Beckham. Allowing this type of fault to creep into your images is difficult to forgive because it's so easy to put right. This is particularly so in camera club circles where you may be submitting images like this to a camera club competition. You're giving the judge a gift here, because the first thing any judge is going to say is the horizon isn't straight, the water is going to run out of your image on the right hand side. Now think about what this tells the viewer about your level of photography. Exactly, it's not good, is it? Within Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop, we have quite a number of tools that allow us to straighten horizontals and verticals in our images. But here I'd like to just concentrate on the straighten tools in Camera Raw and Photoshop. So I suppose the first question we may ask is, do we straighten images in Raw or Photoshop? Well, I would say it's a personal view. I don't think there's any absolute rights or wrongs whether you straighten horizons in RAW or in Photoshop. But if we're going to do the vast majority of our image editing within Camera Raw, then perhaps that could be used as an argument to say we may as well fix the sloping horizons there too. Let's start the process in Adobe Camera Raw with this RAW file. Now I think it's pretty obvious that the sea here is sloping a little bit to the left. Now that's not unusual when you've got your tripod in wet sand. Sometimes it sinks a little bit, and with the best care in the world you're going to suffer with a sloping horizon at some stage. There's also going to be times when perhaps the sloping horizon isn't quite as obvious as this one. So you can do one of two things there. You could go through the straightening process anyway, and if it's not needed, you haven't done much harm. But when we looked at the crop tool, I suggested that from within the crop tool, we always had the overlay selected down here, and that's going to help us here if we want to use it this way. For example, just for the moment, I just want to use the crop tool and the lines within it to tell me if the horizon here is straight. So all I need to do is to drag out any old shape and just move that line in place. Now if you see the line up on the right hand side is right on the horizon, but you can see it drifting off to the left. So we can see here that although it's not a terrible slope to the left, we certainly have one. So I'll hit the escape key to move away from that crop. Now there's a couple of ways we can use the straighten tool. There it is, and there's the little tool tip that pops up. Straighten tool, shortcut key is A. You'll also notice a few words there. Double click to straighten automatically. Well, let's give that a try. Has it worked? Well, I can always test it again by just dragging that down and looking at that line along the horizon, and I think it's done a pretty good job. So on that particular occasion, I'd be quite happy here to just touch that enter key to commit the crop, which we require of course because we've rotated the image. I need to move away from what we've just done, so I'm just going to touch the C key to select the crop and the escape key to come out of that, so we've got our sloping horizon back. Because what we can do, if the automatic fails, is just select the straighten tool from the toolbox, and all we do is draw a line. Be careful with this, but draw the line and say to Photoshop, look, that, and you don't have to go right the way across, but I will just to demonstrate, that part of my picture needs to be perfectly level. It will do it for us. We can see the slight rotation, and when I touch the enter key, there we have our horizon straightened. So given that the sloping horizon is that easy to fix in Adobe Camera Raw, you can perhaps understand why it's not forgiven very easy when we present images in the Camera Club or elsewhere and the horizon is clearly not straight. Now here's a completely different image, but I think that this edge of the building really needs to be vertical. I do have a little bit of a problem with the slither of sky on the left hand side, but of course if I do straighten that vertical section of my image, it's going to impact this, and then I can possibly crop the image at the same time. So we can use the same tool that we used before, but if we double click and try to use the automatic, it's going to try to look for horizontals, not verticals. So you can see it's not done a great deal for the upright there. So I'm going to hit the escape key and I'm going to go back to my tool, and I'm going to say to Photoshop, look, I'd like you to just make sure that part is vertical. And when it does that and I hit the enter key, well, it's done me a big favor in the top left because it's removed the part of the image which I felt was a distraction. Now I suppose the obvious question that may come up at this point is, well, how would we put right a situation where we need to level up a horizon and a vertical too? Well, we have another set of tools to do that called transform tools, and they're up here. But I'd like to come back and deal with them in isolation, otherwise the learning process gets bogged down, the videos get too long. I think it's better if we stay with something more focused on horizons and simple verticals, and we'll look at the transform tools in more detail later. Now there's not a great deal more I can say about straightening horizons and verticals in Adobe Camera Raw, so let's move on to Photoshop and this particular image. Once again, the slope here is pretty obvious, but if we are not quite sure, there is one way we can tell pretty easily. We can put a guide in place. Now we can do that from within the rulers. The rulers can be brought on screen with a shortcut key of Control R, but we'll find them in the View menu. There's the rulers and a reminder of the shortcut key. We can actually right click the rulers and we can measure in pixels, inches, centimeters. Well, you can see the rest. But I don't actually want to measure. What I want to do is to click inside the ruler and drag out a guide, because if I position the guide level with that horizon on the right hand side over here, you can see just how bad this particular image is. So what we need to do is much the same as we did in Adobe Camera Raw. To do this, we need to select the crop tool, and the straighten tool appears at the top of the screen. Now we don't have a double click automatic process here in Photoshop, so perhaps there's another reason, if you're looking for a reason, why you may want to do this in Adobe Camera Raw, but it's a personal choice, as I've said many times. Once I've got that straighten tool selected, then of course I just need to click on the horizon, tell Photoshop which part needs to be straight. There it is. I can quickly look around and look at my guide, and I can even adjust the crop at the same time should I wish to. But once I'm happy with that, and we seem to have a little problem at the top left, once I'm happy with that, you can see here that I've left a 16:9 aspect ratio from a previous piece of work, so that could get in the way a little bit. If that's the case, just clear that, and then we've got the rest of the image to be able to play with. So for example, I could stretch my crop out a little bit on the left, maybe a little bit on the right, and down the bottom just a little bit there. But once I was happy, I can hit the tick on the options bar. To remove the guide, I can go to View, Clear Guides, and the rulers, I can either go back to the View menu and deselect them, but Control R for rulers is quite a nice, quick, easy shortcut. And there we have the horizon nicely straight. Now we can also use the straighten tool for verticals, exactly the same as we did in Adobe Camera Raw. We have to decide which part of the image we would like to see absolutely vertical. We could choose the tower here in Sydney. I could draw a line right down the center to tell Photoshop that that part I would like to be absolutely vertical, and you can see that it's rotated the image a little bit to the right. Of course, I've got the opportunity here to just hit the tick to accept that, but I do have another option, and that is to say, well, perhaps let's take a look at the image with this edge straightened, and I'll live with the fact that the tower is going to lean in very slightly. As you can see, there's not always a direct right and wrong within our photography, because photography is an art. To bring this video to a close, I've opened up this image into Camera Raw because it's not always absolutely obvious that we do have a slope in the horizon. Sometimes we can have a tree line that may be obscuring part of it. Sometimes just the sweep of a beach or the landscape can sometimes throw us off just a bit. But of course we always have the opportunity, as I said right at the start, if in doubt, just go through the motions anyway. Pick up the straighten tool, tell Photoshop that that should be straight, and if it is already straight we'll soon know. But in fact it wasn't straight, and it needed a slight correction. So on this particular occasion I am happy that Photoshop knows better than me, and I can hit the enter key and know that I've got a straight horizon here.